In 1889, a group of European explorers arrived in southern Africa and did something that horrified the local Thonga people. They kissed, lips pressed to lips, mouths open, two adults locked in an embrace the Thonga had never seen before. The reaction from the locals was immediate: disgust, absolute revulsion at what they were watching. To the Europeans, a kiss was the most natural expression of love imaginable. To the Thonga, it looked like two people trying to eat each other's faces. That collision of cultures raises a question that scientists and historians have been chasing for decades. When did humans start kissing, and why? Because the thing about kissing is that it seems so instinctive, so built into us, that you would assume every human society on Earth does it. They do not. And the deeper you dig into the origins of this one small act, pressing your lips against another person's lips, the stranger and more fascinating the story becomes. It stretches back not centuries or even millennia, but millions of years, to a world before humans existed at all. That was 1889. By 2025, researchers would discover that kissing may be 21 million years old. How does something that half the world considers repulsive become the other half's universal symbol of love? It starts with apes. In November of 2025, a team of researchers at the University of Oxford published a study in the journal Evolution and Human Behavior that rewrote what we thought we knew about the origins of kissing. Led by evolutionary biologist Matilda Brindle, the team set out to answer a deceptively simple question. When did kissing begin? Not in recorded history, not on clay tablets or in ancient poetry, but in the deep evolutionary past. Their approach was ambitious. They defined kissing strictly as non-aggressive, mouth-to-mouth contact that does not involve passing food. That definition ruled out mothers feeding their babies and ruled out the territorial lip contact you see in certain fish species. What they were hunting for was the real thing, mouth-to-mouth, on purpose, between social peers. Then they went looking for it across the entire primate family tree. Chimpanzees kiss. This has been documented extensively. They kiss after fights to reconcile. They kiss to comfort distressed group members. They kiss during play and during moments of social tension. Bonobos, our closest living relatives alongside chimps, kiss even more frequently. Bonobos use kissing as a greeting, as conflict resolution, and as a prelude to mating. They are among the most prolific kissers in the animal kingdom outside of humans. Orangutans press their mouths together in moments of tension and reconciliation. Even one species of gorilla has been observed engaging in mouth-to-mouth contact that fits the strict definition of kissing. The Oxford team gathered behavioral data from decades of primate research across multiple continents and plugged it into a phylogenetic model. They treated kissing as a biological trait, like bipedalism or opposable thumbs, and mapped it onto the branching family tree of primates. Then they used Bayesian modeling, a statistical method that simulates millions of possible evolutionary scenarios to estimate the probability that various ancient ancestors also kissed. The model ran 10 million times to provide strong statistical confidence. The results stopped them in their tracks. Kissing almost certainly existed in the common ancestor of all living great apes. That ancestor lived somewhere between 21.5 and 16.9 million years ago. Kissing is not a human invention. It predates our entire species by an almost incomprehensible stretch of time. We inherited it. And so, almost certainly, did the Neanderthals. There is no fossilized kiss. Soft tissue does not survive hundreds of thousands of years in the ground. Behaviors do not leave imprints in stone. But there is indirect evidence that Neanderthals and early humans were pressing their mouths together. Researchers have found a microbe called Methanobrevibacter oralis that is present in both modern humans and Neanderthals. This microbe transmits through saliva. The most straightforward explanation is mouth-to-mouth contact between the two species, which we know also interbred. Neanderthals were kissers, and they were probably kissing us long before anyone carved the first word into a clay tablet. This raises another question that scientists have been arguing about for decades. Why do we kiss at all? What possible advantage does pressing your mouth against another person's mouth provide? Matilda Brindle herself noted that kissing seems like an evolutionary paradox. It does not directly aid survival. It actively transmits pathogens. From a purely logical standpoint, it is a risky behavior with no obvious payoff. One of the oldest theories comes from premastication. In many primate species and in traditional human cultures that still exist today, mothers chew food into a soft paste and then transfer it directly from their mouths into the mouths of their infants. Mouth to mouth, tongue to tongue, an act of feeding that looks remarkably similar to a deep kiss. The ethologist Irenaeus Abel Ebesfeld proposed that romantic kissing evolved from exactly this behavior. Generations of infants grew up associating mouth contact with nourishment, comfort, and the warmth of a parent's body. Over millions of years, that association drifted from feeding into affection, from survival into love. In Papua New Guinea, researchers documented communities that practiced kiss feeding but did not practice social kissing at all. The two behaviors are related, but the transition between them is not automatic. It had to be culturally learned and reinforced over generations. Another theory proposes that kissing evolved from close-range scent assessment. Primates are deeply tuned to smell, and getting face-to-face with another individual allows you to sample their chemical signature. You pick up information about their health, their hormonal state, and their genetic compatibility, all without conscious awareness. Some researchers believe that what we now call kissing started as two primates sniffing each other's faces from very close range. Over time, the sniffing became lip contact, and the sensory exchange grew more intimate and socially charged. In the ancient Sanskrit of the Vedas, the word for kiss and the word for sniff were the same, which may be a linguistic fossil of this very transition. Whatever the original reason, the behavior stuck. It survived millions of years of evolutionary pressure, jumped across species boundaries, and embedded itself so deeply in primate social life that by the time humans came along, kissing was already ancient. Then, relatively recently in the grand timeline of life on Earth, humans began recording their world, and almost immediately, they started writing about kissing. The oldest written evidence comes from the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now Iraq and Syria. The people who lived there, the Sumerians, wrote in cuneiform script on small clay tablets. Thousands of those tablets have survived, baked hard by time, and buried in the desert sand. And scattered among the records of grain shipments and legal disputes and prayers to forgotten gods are descriptions of people kissing. Troels Pank Arbol, an Assyriologist at the University of Copenhagen who specializes in the history of medicine in ancient Mesopotamia, spent years combing through those tablets. What he found, published in the journal Science in 2023, alongside colleague Sophie Lund Rasmussen at Oxford, pushed the documented history of romantic kissing back by roughly 1,000 years. Before their research, the scientific consensus pointed to India around 1500 BCE as the earliest documented origin of romantic kissing. Arbol and Rasmussen showed that Mesopotamians were writing about lip-to-lip romantic contact a full millennium earlier, around 2500 BCE. The tablets described two distinct categories of kissing. The first was the friendly parental kiss. People kissed the feet of their elders or pressed their lips to the ground as a gesture of respect or submission. Nothing romantic about it. The second category was different entirely. It was the lip kiss with an erotic and intimate overtone, and this one came with serious rules. Romantic kissing in ancient Mesopotamia was reserved for married couples. Public displays of affection were taboo, something the culture frowned upon and even policed. Kissing between unmarried people was seen as giving in to sexual temptation. Priestesses and other individuals expected to remain celibate were believed to lose their very ability to speak if they kissed someone. Think about that for a second. A society that believed kissing could steal your voice. The fact that they needed rules this extreme tells you something. People were doing it constantly. You do not create elaborate social punishments around something nobody is interested in. One of the most vivid pieces of evidence is a baked clay model from around 1800 BCE, now housed in the British Museum in London. It depicts a nude couple on a piece of furniture, embracing and kissing. 3,800 years old, and the scene is instantly recognizable to anyone alive today. Two people tangled up in each other, lost in a kiss. Some things, it turns out, do not change across millennia. But the Mesopotamians were not just documenting romance on those clay tablets. They were also, without knowing it, documenting disease. Among the medical texts etched into clay, Arbol found descriptions of an illness the ancient Mesopotamians called bushanu. It caused blisters and sores in and around the mouth. The infected person apparently smelled terrible. The symptoms bear a resemblance to herpes simplex virus 1, which spreads through saliva and close oral contact. Kissing may have been spreading disease across the ancient world for thousands of years before anyone understood how germs actually worked. The Mesopotamians blamed angry gods and demonic forces, not pathogens. But the biology was already in motion. While Mesopotamians were pressing their cuneiform styluses into wet clay, something parallel was unfolding thousands of miles to the east. The Vedas, the ancient Sanskrit scriptures that form the foundation of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, contain some of the earliest South Asian references to kissing. These texts date to roughly 1500 BCE, and the language they use is revealing. The words for kiss and sniff were interchangeable, described by the same term. The earliest version of kissing in India was not lip pressing at all. It was mouth sniffing. Lovers would lean close, inhale each other's scent, and press their lips to skin or to other lips while breathing in deeply. Intimacy, in this world, was as much about scent as it was about touch. Later Vedic texts evolved the language. They describe lovers setting mouth to mouth. The Mahabharata, one of the great Indian epics, contains references to affection expressed through lip contact. But it was the Kama Sutra that took kissing somewhere entirely new. Written by a sage named Vatsyayana around the 3rd century of the Common Era, the Kama Sutra is often reduced to a catalogue of sexual positions. That is a drastic misreading. The text is a sprawling guide to human pleasure, emotional connection, and erotic artistry, and it devotes extraordinary attention to kissing. Over 200 passages discuss different types of kisses, when to deploy them, and what response the kissed person should offer in return. Vatsyayana catalogued at least 19 distinct types. There is the measured kiss, the throbbing kiss, the brushing kiss, the equal kiss where both partners face each other squarely, and the tongue combat where both tongues engage. Each type has a name, a context, and a prescribed emotional register. The level of detail is staggering by any era's standards. Vatsyayana described what a young woman should do when she is bashful during a kiss, how she should grasp her partner's lip while her eyes are closed, and how she should brush his lips with the very tip of her tongue. He described the kiss given from behind, the kiss stolen while a partner sleeps, the kiss used to end an argument, and the kiss delivered as a declaration of desire. He treated the placement of each lip, the roll of the breath, and the tilt of the head with the same rigor that a musician would bring to studying an instrument. The Kama Sutra does not treat kissing as a prelude to something more important. It treats kissing as the thing itself, an art form worthy of lifelong mastery. One ancient passage, translated from a Mesopotamian tablet but echoing the same spirit running through the Kama Sutra, reads roughly like this: "My upper lip becomes moist while my lower lip trembles. I shall embrace, I shall kiss." 4,000 years of distance between that clay tablet in the British Museum and a modern couple on a first date, and the feeling described is identical. While the ancient Near East and South Asia were codifying and celebrating the kiss, the civilization that arguably did the most to export kissing across the Western world was ancient Rome. The Romans were obsessed with kissing, not in a sentimental way, but in the way Romans were obsessed with everything. They organized it, classified it, built social rules and legal traditions around it, and created separate Latin words for different intensities of the act. The osculum was the social kiss, light, closed mouth, typically delivered on the cheek or hand. You gave an osculum to your relatives in greeting, to your friends at the marketplace, to acquaintances during the formal morning call known as the salutatio. There was even a legal tradition called the ius osculi that permitted women to kiss their relatives on the lips, extending as far as the 6th degree of relation on the first meeting of each day. Refusing to kiss a relative was a deliberate statement. It meant you no longer considered them family. One Roman writer noted that the custom also served a darker purpose. Husbands returning home would kiss their wives on the lips to check whether they had been drinking wine, which was forbidden for women in the early republic. The basium was more intimate. This was the kiss between husband and wife, on the lips but still restrained. Closed mouth, tender, a signal of affection and domestic commitment rather than passion. The Latin word basium is the direct ancestor of the word for kiss in nearly every modern Romance language. Bacio in Italian, baso in Spanish, besa in French. And then came the savium. This was the passionate kiss, the open-mouthed, full-contact exchange between lovers. Roman writers in the early period associated the savium with sexuality and sometimes with moral transgression. The poet Catullus, famous for his explicit and emotionally raw verses, wrote extensively about this kind of kiss. The savium was the kiss you gave behind closed doors, and sharing one in public was considered vulgar. The only moment a public passionate kiss was even marginally acceptable was at the conclusion of a formal betrothal ceremony, and even then, a restrained basium was preferred. Rome did not just practice kissing, Rome exported it. As Roman legions conquered territory stretching from Britain to North Africa to the borders of Persia, they carried their kissing customs with them. Populations that had never pressed lips to lips encountered Romans who did it as casually as a handshake. The cultural influence was enormous and lasting. When the Roman Empire fractured and gave way to the kingdoms of medieval Europe, kissing survived the transition intact and arguably grew more important. The Christian Church adopted the kiss of peace, the osculum passis, as a part of its liturgy. Congregants would kiss each other during services as a sign of reconciliation and spiritual unity. The wedding kiss became a legal and sacramental seal on the marriage contract. In some regions, a betrothal was not considered binding until the couple kissed, and the phrase that survives to this day, "You may now kiss the bride," carries an echo of that legal tradition. A kiss was not just an expression of feeling, it was a contractual act with witnesses. Medieval knights kissed their lord's hands or rings as a gesture of fealty. Bishops received kisses on their rings as symbols of spiritual authority. Even enemies exchanged the kiss of peace during truces and treaty negotiations. Judas Iscariot's betrayal of Jesus with a kiss became one of the most searing images in Western art and literature. Not because a kiss was trivial, but precisely because it carried so much weight. To betray someone with a kiss was to corrupt the very gesture that was supposed to signify trust, loyalty, and love. The fact that the betrayal worked as a dramatic device tells you how deeply embedded kissing had become in the social fabric of Christian Europe. Kissing was no longer just biology or desire, it was law, it was religion. It was the architecture of Western civilization, brick by invisible brick, but the Romans and the medieval Christians could not have known what modern neuroscience would eventually discover about what actually happens inside your skull during a kiss. The experience of a kiss is not just emotional. It is chemical, neurological, and almost absurdly complex for something that lasts a few seconds. 5 of the 12 cranial nerves that affect brain function are actively firing during a kiss. They shuttle information from your lips, tongue, cheeks, and nose to a brain that is frantically processing temperature, taste, smell, and movement all at once. Your lips are among the most densely nerve-packed structures on your entire body. In the brain's somatosensory cortex, the region that maps tactile sensation across a distorted body image, lips take up a disproportionately large territory. Your brain dedicates more processing power to what your lips are feeling than to what your entire back and torso are feeling combined. When those nerves fire during a kiss, the brain responds with a cascade of chemicals that researchers are still mapping. Dopamine surges first. This is the neurotransmitter of pleasure and reward. the same chemical that spikes when you eat something delicious, hear a song you love, or win a bet. The dopamine system activates the same brain region that responds to addictive substances, which is why some researchers compare early romantic love to a kind of dependency. A kiss delivers a hit, and your brain wants another one. Oxytocin follows close behind. This is the bonding hormone. It surges during childbirth, during breastfeeding, and during sustained physical contact between people who trust each other. When it floods your system during a kiss, it generates feelings of closeness, safety, and attachment. Couples who maintain regular physical affection, including frequent kissing, show consistently elevated oxytocin levels even years into a relationship. The chemistry keeps reinforcing the bond, rewarding you neurologically for staying connected to your partner. Serotonin spikes alongside the others. This is the same neurotransmitter that is disrupted in obsessive-compulsive disorder, which may explain why new love feels so obsessive. You cannot stop thinking about the other person. You replay moments on a loop. Your brain is running the same neurochemical pattern that drives compulsive behavior, except instead of checking the stove, you are checking your phone for their reply. While all of this is surging, cortisol drops. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and kissing measurably reduces it. Blood pressure falls. Anxiety loosens. The body enters a state that is simultaneously aroused and calm, a rare neurochemical combination that very few other human experiences produce. And there is another layer that gets less attention but may be the most fascinating of all. When you kiss someone, you are unconsciously sampling their biology. Saliva contains trace amounts of testosterone, which can subtly influence arousal over time. More importantly, researchers believe that the close facial contact of a kiss allows you to assess your partner's major histocompatibility complex, a set of genes that govern immune function. The theory is that humans are subconsciously attracted to partners whose MHC genes differ from their own, because children from genetically diverse parents tend to have stronger immune systems. A kiss, in this reading, goes far beyond affection. It is a biological compatibility test you are running without knowing it. So kissing rewires your brain, calms your nervous system, bonds you to another person, and quietly auditions their genetics. That is an enormous amount of work for 2 pairs of lips and a few seconds of contact. But despite everything kissing does to the brain and body, it is not a universal human behavior, not even close. And this is the part of the story that complicates everything we have just discussed. If kissing is so neurologically rewarding, if it floods the brain with bonding chemicals and reduces stress and quietly auditions your partner's genetics, you would expect every human culture on the planet to have stumbled onto it independently. They did not. In 2015, anthropologist William Jankowiak at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, published a cross-cultural study that surveyed 168 societies around the world. He expected to find romantic kissing nearly everywhere. The results shocked him. He found it in 46% of cultures, fewer than half. The remaining 54% showed no evidence of romantic mouth-to-mouth kissing at all. Some of those cultures found the practice actively disgusting. The Thonga's reaction in southern Africa was not an outlier. The Mahinaku of the Brazilian Amazon had a strikingly similar response when they first observed Europeans kissing. They practiced elaborate forms of physical affection among themselves, including biting each other's eyebrows as a sign of intimacy, but found mouth-to-mouth contact bewildering and off-putting. The Trobriand Islanders of Melanesia reportedly dismissed kissing as a silly and insipid amusement, something beneath them. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Polynesia, and among some indigenous communities in the Americas, romantic kissing was either absent entirely or treated as a foreign import that arrived with European colonization. These were not cultures that lacked intimacy. They were not cold or emotionally distant. They held hands. They embraced for long periods. They groomed each other's hair and skin. They rubbed noses and foreheads together. They shared food. They pressed their faces close enough to inhale each other's breath. They simply never arrived at the specific behavior of pressing open mouths together and decided it was something worth repeating or celebrating. Jankowiak's data revealed something nobody expected. Romantic kissing was significantly more common in societies with distinct social classes, complex hierarchies, and layered power structures. It was much rarer in egalitarian foraging communities. Small band hunter-gatherer groups who lived without formal ranks and distributed food and resources more or less equally. The pattern held across continents and across every kind of environment, from Arctic tundra to tropical forest. Nobody has a definitive explanation for why this correlation exists. One hypothesis is that kissing functions partly as a social performance, a public or private demonstration of intimacy and status that becomes more relevant as societies grow larger, more anonymous, and more competitive. In a band of 30 people where everyone knows everyone, you do not need elaborate displays. In a city of 100,000, symbols of romantic connection carry different weight. Another possibility is simpler. Complex societies tend to have more exposure to other cultures, more trade routes, more cultural exchange. Kissing may simply have spread along those networks the way language, religion, and technology spread, carried from one society to the next by merchants, soldiers, travelers, and storytellers, until it reached communities that had never thought of it on their own. This data forces a recalibration of assumptions we rarely question. The romantic kiss is not some hardwired instinct buried in every human brain, waiting to be activated by the right moment or the right person. It is a behavior that our primate ancestors likely practiced for millions of years for social bonding, that some early human cultures elaborated into art and law and religion, and that others never adopted at all. The neurochemical response to a kiss, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the cortisol reduction, that part is biological. Your brain is wired to reward mouth-to-mouth contact. But the decision to do it in the first place, the cultural meaning layered on top of it, the association with romance and commitment and fidelity, all of that is learned. And that distinction changes the real question entirely. The question is not just when humans started kissing. The question is when kissing started meaning love. When did a biological behavior, something our ape ancestors used for grooming and conflict resolution and social bonding, get loaded up with all this additional weight? Romance, desire, commitment, betrayal, heartbreak. A first kiss that changes the direction of two lives. A last kiss that ends a relationship. A broken kiss as the symbol of a broken promise. The answer is that it happened slowly, over thousands of years, in dozens of different civilizations, each one adding new meaning to the same ancient gesture. The Sumerians kissed and called it sacred, embedding it in their myths about gods and writing rules to contain it. The Indians kissed and called it art, cataloging its variations with the precision of master craftsmen. The Romans kissed and called it law, using it to seal contracts and marriages and political alliances. Medieval Christians kissed and called it peace, incorporating it into their most solemn rituals of reconciliation and worship. And gradually, through centuries of poetry and courtship and cultural collision, and eventually through film and television and the internet, the kiss became the single most widely recognized symbol of romantic love on the planet. Even cultures that never traditionally practiced it have now been exposed to it through global media, and many have adopted it, creating a feedback loop between ancient biology and modern cultural influence. The story of kissing is, in a strange way, the story of how humans take something animal and make it mean something more. We did not invent the gesture. We inherited it from creatures who had no concept of romance, no language to describe desire, no poetry to celebrate the moment their lips touched another's. But we took that gesture and we gave it weight. We loaded it with promises. We made it count. All of it traces back to a common ancestor, a primate pressing its mouth against another primate's mouth in a vanished forest somewhere between 21 and 17 million years ago, for reasons that even the sharpest minds in evolutionary biology are still debating in university laboratories and journal articles today. The history of kissing tells us something uncomfortable and beautiful at the same time. We like to believe that love is spontaneous, that attraction is pure instinct, that a kiss is the most honest gesture two people can share. But behind that honesty is chemistry. Behind that chemistry is evolution. And behind that, evolution is a behavior so ancient, it predates language, culture, religion, nations, writing, agriculture, and even our species. The kiss you share today is an echo of something that began before there were words to describe it, before there were people to experience it, before there was anyone around to wonder what it meant. Somewhere between the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia and the dopamine flooding a modern brain, kissing stopped being just a behavior. It became a promise. A promise that someone, out of everyone in the world, chose to get that close, chose to stay. If this changed the way you think about something as simple as a kiss, hit subscribe and leave a comment telling us what surprised you most. We have a lot more stories like this one coming, so smash that like button so you do not miss what is next.